Welcome in to episode 2 of Dropping Dimes. I am your host, Matt Nost, and I am excited to talk about more NBA basketball. I've got 2 guests coming up. They were nice enough to help me do a dry run last week. They're fans of the show. It's previous iteration on Collider, and they would love to talk basketball, so I'll be having them coming up in about 15 minutes. The first one is Ben, and then around the 40-minute mark or so is Teutonia World. And Ben is a Pacers fan. Teutonia is a Bucks fan. And I imagine we're going to be talking about those 2 teams once we get into it. So the general state of the bubble, it's been fantastic. A lot of these games have come down to final shots or final couple possessions. Teams are battling it out. And where it's really evident is, or the most dramatic, I guess, is in that race for the final seed in the West. There are 5 teams fighting it out. It's the Grizzlies, Blazers, Spurs, Pelicans, Suns, and Kings. Now, right now, the Grizzlies are in the driver's seat. They can, determine their fate, but they're fighting an uphill battle. They've lost 3 straight games, and then Jaren Jackson Jr. went out with a torn meniscus, and he's done for the season. And that hurts because he and Ja and their young core have been so exciting to watch. They've been in these. They've all been close games for them. They very well could be 2-1, if not 3-0 at this point. So to lose Jaren Jackson, man, that's going to be tough. That is going to be really tough, especially with other teams surging. The Blazers are nipping at their heels a game and a half back, and the Spurs are nipping at their heels at 2 games back. The Pels are 2.5. Suns are 3, and Kings are 3.5. Now, the Suns have won 3 straight games. They and the Pacers are 3-0. The Raptors, who play today, are 2-0. But, if the Suns keep pushing, they can make their way into this conversation pretty quickly, which I didn't think was genuinely possible. And we'll see by the end of this 8-game little tune-up before the playoffs. But the Grizzlies, formerly in the driver's seat, I don't know exactly what they do, because coming up, the Grizzlies schedule is Jazz, OKC, Raptors, Celtics, and Bucks. Now, the Bucks, by that final game, are going to more than likely do what they did last night, which is play spot minutes for their starters, and their second unit is going to get full run. That's my guess by that point. The Bucks only really need to secure 1 more win, I believe, to wrap up the number 1 overall seed in the East. It could be 2 wins, but I think it's just 1 more win because they're 5 games up right now on the Raptors. So the Raptors would have to close out perfect, and the Bucks would have to, lose all the rest, and then the Raptors would leap over them. But the likelihood of that happening is really slim. So. Man, the Grizz. So they have Jazz should be a tough game. It's winnable for them, but it's going to be a tough game, especially without Triple J. And then after that, OKC, because the other problem that the Grizzlies are running into with the Jazz and OKC as their next 2 games is that middle pack of, 4 or 5 teams in the West are all fighting for various seeding. They're all very close to one another. So they're going to come out guns a-blazing, more than likely, to try and further secure a higher seed so they can get, or try and line up the matchup they feel that is best for them. The Blazers, after that, they've got Nuggets, Clippers, Sixers, Mavs, and Nets to close out. They're running into the same problem. The Nuggets, Clippers, Sixers, Mavs are all fighting for their lives. And the Nets, by the end, the Nets will make it in. There's no way the Wizards do it. So who knows what the Nets are going to be at that point. And hell, is Jamal Crawford going to be ready to play? Pulled up with a hamstring injury last night. I don't know how serious it is as of right now, how long it'll keep him out. But granted, the guy is in his 40s. It's not, you don't bounce back as quickly from injuries. So the Blazers, the Nuggets, that's a winnable game for them, especially with, they're not rolling out their full complement of starters, whereas the Blazers are pretty much fully healthy. And right now, dear God, you have 4 legitimate shooters out there with Gary Trent Jr., and you add him to Dame, CJ, and Carmelo. I mean, they can just light people up. Last night was an interesting showdown between the Rockets, who are the smallest team, the smallest starting five, versus the Blazers, who I believe have the largest starting five. And it was evident, man. The Blazers just out rebounded the living hell out of them. I think the final tally was 64-39. I mean, that's a huge margin. If you look at the rest of the numbers, the only big glaring difference is the Rockets hit 7 more threes, but they took something along the lines of 20 more threes. Still, though, those 7 extra threes can make up for some of the lack of rebounding and the reduced second chance opportunity points on offensive boards. But if you're going to get crushed like that on rebounds against a bunch of different teams, then you need to have, in a best of 7 series, 4 good 3-point shooting nights to win those games. And the West is so stacked right now, that's going to be a tall order. It's not impossible for the Rockets, but the Blazers, so rolling out against the Nuggets next, they've got a shot against that. The Clippers after that, who knows? Will their full rotation be there finally? I'd assume so by that point, but we shall see. And then Sixers still fighting for positioning. Mavs after that, fighting for positioning. And then the Nets to close out. The Spurs below them have Nuggets, Jazz, Pels, Rockets, and then Jazz again. Tough schedule. That's going to be tough. The Spurs, who are surging, I think they're 2-1 right now, but Pop's got them playing. They're only 2 games back. It's entirely conceivable they keep their playoff streak alive, which I didn't. At the start of the season, I was one of the ones that was, ringing the doom prediction of lack of 3-point shooting, loss of the offensive punch that they've had in seasons past, and reduced defensive prowess was going to finally keep them out. Look, it's still Greg Popovich, and it's still the Spurs, and they still have a system. So perhaps they can do it. Now, the Pels below them at 2.5 games out, they have the easiest schedule, bar none. They have the Kings, Wizards, Spurs, Kings, Magic. So Kings twice, who are last of all the seeds in the West, twice. And then the Wizards, who should not be there. That should be a gimme win for them. The Spurs is going to be their toughest matchup and honestly will help determine their fate. Because if they can beat the Spurs, then they'll help leap them over the Spurs themselves. And then the Magic after that. So the Pels, by rights, could be in the driver's seat to do this. I mean, we'll see over the course of time. And will Zion continue to have minutes restrictions? Now, he did not have a minutes restriction last night, by and large. He played, more than the spot 3 minutes that he was playing. But, the organization has said that they are going to throttle him back. And they went against the grain in their last game with that. But will that maintain? What exactly are they going to do? It's not entirely clear as of right now. They're a completely different team out there when Zion is on the court. His points per minute is undeniably fantastic. So to have him out there gives their offense a punch that they just don't have. So they need Zion to play as much as possible. But then the fear is you're not really going to contend for a championship this year. So do you want to risk potentially the long-term health and future? They say that Zion isn't up to game speed, but the problem is the only way to really get up to game speed is to play in games, but they're trying to manage his minutes so they don't tax him and hurt his long-term future and longevity within the league. So they're in this little catch-22, damned if they do, damned if they don't. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, how important is the playoffs? Because part of it is, hey, Anthony Davis, we didn't need you. Look at this young core. We're up and coming. But the West is only going to be more difficult next season. I mean, think about it. The maturation of these young teams and some others that will bounce back that had injuries. And, once they have their full complement and rosters, I don't know. I mean, I'd love to see the Pels in. So would the NBA. But is it worth it, or should you really just be playing him in spot minutes and focus on next year and the year after and try and build a perennial contender as opposed to a perennial playoff, would be. Not sure. The Suns, after that, at 3 games back, they have Pacers, Heat, OKC, Sixers, Mavs. That's tough. Every one of those teams is playing hard as can be. Now, towards the end of that, the Mavs to close out. Perhaps the Mavs will be locked into their spot. So who knows if you'll get full runs out of Luka and Porzingis. Not sure. Same with the Sixers. They could be locked in or could be still fighting for seeding at that point. But I don't know, man. That's tough. I mean, granted, look, you just beat the Clippers. And great shot for Devin Booker at the end there. Actually, it was 2 straight possessions down on the court. He made the one right before that on a nice little jumper, I think, from the elbow. He actually had, a closeout shot in the first half, too, a little clutch, too. And the Pels, they look reinvigorated. DeAndre Ayton is shooting and hitting threes, for Christ's sakes. Ricky Rubio, I think, went 3 of 4 last night, from three-point land. So the the Suns are surging, but is that going to maintain? Are they going to be able to do that for 5 more games? That's asking a lot of a team that's been up and down, but mostly down this season, that hasn't really found their stride yet. So I don't know. And then after that is Kings 3.5 games back. Realistically, I just don't. I don't see how the Kings do this. They have the Pelicans, the Nets, the Rockets, the Pels again, and the Lakers. Now, the Pelicans, if they beat the Pels twice, then yeah, they could be in this conversation because that would obviously bump them lower and vault them over in that discussion. And especially if the Pelicans then beat the Spurs and the Spurs can't close out some of the tough games that they've got, then yeah, they can do it. I guess anything is genuinely possible. But the Pels, the Nets after that, who knows what Nets team you're going to get. That stat line or that point spread line last night was a little bit ridiculous. But, we'll see. The Kings, I'm just not buying as of right now. I think everybody else in this has a realistic, on some level, shot. The Suns seems somewhat far-fetched, being 3 games out. You need to win out. You need to have everybody above you really crap the bed in order to make a run at this and genuinely, make some noise. But perhaps they will. Perhaps they will. I don't know. Only time will tell. All right, so any second now, should be joined by Ben Jones jumping in, and he is a Pacers fan, so we'll get to the amazing TJ Warren as of late, just playing lights out. Let's talk about that. Let's see. What other things coming up? So I watched the Celtics Heat game as well. There's an interesting parallel between the Celtics and the Rockets last night because both Tatum and Harden got into foul trouble in the third quarter and had to sit. And, that changes the complexion of both of those teams and alters exactly who they are. All right, so Ben is here, so I'm going to admit Ben and bring him in. And he is joining momentarily. We should see him on screen and hopefully in audio. Ben, how are you, sir?
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. Thank you so much for helping with the test run last week, which, ended up being a test run, but just working out the kinks on this, and we'll have a live stream going forward, hopefully come Friday's show. All right, so what do you want to talk about? We'll let you dictate the conversation since you're jumping in. You were kind enough to join a second time.
Yeah. I was wondering, now that we've gotten kind of a sample size of the game so far, what like your most anticipated playoff matchup would be. I'm starting to think, like, now that things have gotten going, like, who would be interesting to watch in like a whole series against each other.
Okay. Well, right now the most interesting thing to me is your Pacers. Can TJ Warren, Mr. Cash Considerations himself, actually keep this going? I don't know. But so them versus the Heat, I think in the West, it's if the Clippers, who are now 1-2, slip down to third, Denver versus Dallas in the first round is a really compelling matchup to me. Because, with the surging Luka Porzingis combo versus Denver, who, last year made a push. Can they continue that trend and trajectory? if that is the way it shakes out, that to me is more interesting than Denver versus OKC, just because I think the matchups are more interesting amongst, Dallas and Denver, like the Porzingis versus Jokic, and then is Jamal Murray and, Luka, who's going to shine there? You assume Luka, that now the youngest ever 30-point, 20-rebound, triple-double, beat Oscar Robertson by 2 years. I think that one to me is the one that stands out if it shakes out that way, because, the Clippers could have won that game last night and would be at 2-1, but they're only a game up on, Denver right now. And I could see Denver jumping back into this conversation and making the vault into second. It's not entirely inconceivable. What about you? What's an interesting matchup that you see or potentially see?
Yeah, I think along with Dallas, I'd like to see them play Houston. I don't know how that would like Houston would probably have to maintain and get up to the 3, and Dallas would have to kind of kick up to the 6 or something. But after seeing that game was like 150 to 140 something one of the first few nights, just all offense. I'd like that just because Houston, I just don't want to see them play Utah again. So I feel like that's been played out.
Yeah. Although, don't you kind of want to see somehow, although it wouldn't work out that way, but Blazers versus Rockets, just to see Dame and Westbrook, one more time. They were doing it a little bit last night. Is not as over the top. Yeah, I mean, that offensive score that you talked about between the two, you could say that some of that is it's early on and the guys don't have the conditioning. So defense is a lot about conditioning. So once they get, their legs underneath them and whatnot, but neither team is really known for their defensive prowess. Right. So, yeah, I think your assessment of just the fact that it would be a score fest, I mean, it is possible, especially like, say, Houston's currently in the 4 spot and Dallas is at 7, but Dallas could launch into the 5 and Houston can maintain at 4, or Houston goes up to 3 and Dallas could move up 1 position to 6. Like, yeah, that's entirely conceivable. Last night, Houston just got crushed on rebounds, flat out. It wasn't even close. They almost doubled. It was, I think, within 9 rebounds of doubling what Houston got. So Dallas has more size, especially with Porzingis. So will that, that coupled with they can shoot threes. They're not going to shoot as many as Houston, but they can shoot threes pretty well. Will Houston be able to overcome that? I mean, you have 2 former MVPs, so you would assume that they've got the firepower to do it. But yeah, I mean, that could be a hell of a matchup. So how do you feel about TJ Warren? Is this real to you or is this fool's gold?
It is. Honestly, like he's just, I don't know, I kind of got sold on the whole, like how he's the David West protege. Like that, he was on his like AAU team way back in the day, and like David West has always pushed him as like, okay, he's my guy. And so like part of me is like, okay, he's got like he always had like some special like he could always score. He just couldn't shoot the 3 really up until this year. And so I don't know, throughout the season, like he'd show flashes like, okay, he can really play. And I think this setting is just so for somebody like him who's like he's not like a crowd guy. I feel like he doesn't feed into energy of either the home crowd or like silencing the other crowd. He just like just kind of silently plays. So it's kind of feeding into how he worked, I guess. So I mean, he's not going to average 40 points a game, but
well, 53, 34, and 32. Yeah. But it's all efficient shooting. Yeah. I think the biggest thing from last night was TJ McConnell at one point in the first half had 4 straight layups. 4 straight.
Yeah.
He looks like the old man out there just playing this below the rim game, and everybody, I mean, he just keeps doing these little up and unders and floater with the right hand leaning out and using his body to shield back. I would love to see a first-round matchup with them in the Heat because TJ and Jimmy just do not like one another.
Yeah, and that was real, too. That wasn't like where they kind of get into it and get pulled apart. Like, even afterwards, they seem to say, like, real stuff.
Yeah, no, that was legit. That is Jimmy saying, you're nothing, and TJ just saying, fuck you.
Yeah.
And look, right now, TJ is backing up his claim that he is just as good as someone like Jimmy Butler. I mean, I don't believe it, but at the same time, if you have a couple seasons like this, then yeah, you legitimately could enter into that kind of conversation. It's just crazy to watch because, without Sabonis, Miles Turner hitting threes last night. Ridiculous. You don't have to lean on Oladipo to entirely create for the offense, or Brogdon when Oladipo was out. Now, if you have TJ Warren and Miles Turner hitting threes, you guys are suddenly kind of dangerous.
Yeah, and I think it's a comfort thing with Miles. Like, I don't know, they tried to fit that Sabonis Turner thing all year just because like that's what the hand they've been dealt, but it really doesn't go together. Like through no fault of their own, they've tried it, but them on the court at the same time, Miles Turner just kind of fades away, and I don't know. I feel like this is more of who he can be. Maybe that's on another team, but
What, Turner or Sabonis?
Turner.
Yeah, because as I told you on the last one, if you look the on-off numbers with Sabonis, so when Turner is off and it's just Sabonis out there, your offense goes up by it's like 11 point something points overall. But your defense does take a little bit of a slip, and then versus when he's off and Turner is on, your defense goes up, but your offense falls off a cliff, and it's just like, wow, Sabonis opens up so much fluidity to the offense and clears the lane, and his passing ability really gives, makes them a little bit more lethal. Now you take him out and just like, well, I mean, nobody saw this, at least, okay, nobody's strong. Outside of TJ Warren's family, I don't know anybody saw TJ Warren blown up for 53, 34, and 32. I mean, who knows what he does in the next, if he consistently averages over 30 points for the rest of this, it's got to be legitimate at that point.
Yeah. And I don't know. And we'll see if Sabonis comes back because like they haven't totally ruled that out. But I don't know. I wouldn't for entertainment wise. I'd love for them to play the Heat, but I wouldn't want any piece of them after watching like Bam and all of that. I think Miami's probably the biggest. Well, Miami and Toronto, I think, are just as strong in the East against Milwaukee as like that whole set of teams in the West. Like I think the East is proven to be a little stronger at the top than it looks like a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I think because the gentleman coming after you is a Bucks fan, and I have the same question about the Bucks that I had at the end of the playoffs last year and going throughout the entire season this year. It's, can somebody else get me a bucket? Like against the Rockets just put the clamps down, especially into game. It's like, okay, do something. Now, last night, Giannis, Middleton, Lopez, Hill, and Bledsoe got limited runs. They all played 20 minutes or less. So it's really not indicative of who they are. But still, though, the Nets were running out mostly a G League team against a second unit that has championship aspirations. That second unit should kind of dominate. And it wasn't the case, but, it's early on. Who knows exactly? Yeah, the Raptors look legit. I think the Celtics can be legit. Miami is scary because Duncan Robinson can hit a three.
It's crazy. That's one I just never saw coming. He was like in the G League last year, and like it makes sense now, but
well, between him and Nunn and Hero, it's like they got three young kids just crushing. And then you add that to Adebayo, who is now an all-star, like he could be a perennial all-star in the East, and Jimmy Butler. Yeah, the only thing I don't like about it is Goran Dragic seems to be playing a little too dirty down in the bubble.
Yeah.
That trip last night is like, really, man, don't do that. That's some petty bullshit.
He's always been a pest like that. Like,
a little bit.
Pull something.
Yeah. Something like there was reports, early on that him and Butler really clicked because Butler loved his competitive nature and they became fast friends. I don't know if that's still the case or whatnot, but I don't mind competitive fire. I just don't like it when, you're potentially hurting your fellow, colleagues, so to speak, right, for the sake of a possession and whatnot. That to me is, it's bullshit. It's the Draymond Green, I didn't mean to kick him in the balls, or Zaza stepping under guys. Oh. Yeah, or Dellavedova like flying into people. It's like, dude, this is unnecessary and you fucking know it.
It's very Heat, though. It's like what Kelly Olynyk a few years ago when he's on that team now, and he pulled Kevin Love's shoulder like out of its place and all that.
Yeah. Although that's one where I actually don't really blame Kelly for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never really viewed him as a dirty player. He's always like, because he takes so many stinking charges that he's always been like a hustle guy to me. And that to me was like a weird, he was just aggressively hustling, even though, it happens. Like Zaza, when he stepped under Kawhi, I think that is one of the few times Zaza actually inadvertently stepped under somebody.
Yeah, the one time.
The one time. But the problem is we have so much evidence of you being a douche that, I'm sorry, where we see smoke now, we just assume there's fire. So yeah, Olynyk, I somewhat give a pass to for that one because it's the only one I could think of like that. But it could have been premeditated. I don't know. Only Kelly really knows, or potentially anybody he told in that locker room. So, do you think you have a chance to make some noise in the playoffs?
I think, given the environment, like I said, like chaos is more possible now. But I don't know if they got Miami. I just didn't like the way they looked against them the whole season. So I don't know. It's tough to say. I want to see them play tougher teams because so far they played like the Magic, the Sixers, like at a vulnerable point when there's always something going on with the Sixers.
Yeah.
And who they played the other night. I'm forgetting the team they played. Oh, Washington. So it's like, what do you really learn from that?
It doesn't. Yeah, Washington doesn't count. They shouldn't be there of all the teams. And I was against the Suns going, but they're 3-0 now. So what the hell do I know? And potentially have a chance to sneak in to that 8th spot. It's possible. It is possible. Yeah, you don't know. I mean, with the Sixers, you don't know what you're going to get night in, night out now. That's the problem, is like moving Shake Milton to the point guard to slip Simmons over to the dunker spot and whatnot and change up the half-court offense. Them crowing about, oh, we finally unlocked this, was just like, yeah, but it took you an entire season and we're supposed to believe in this. Plus, are you going to get consistency from Joel? Because as their future hinges upon, what he can give them night in, night out. He could be the best player in the league. But is he going to take the conditioning seriously and his diet and, actually put in the time and the effort and the work? I don't know. Time will tell on that. But yeah, the Sixers, and the other thing too with them is they were Pantheon level at home this year and one of the worst teams in the history of a league of any contender on the road.
Yeah.
So is that going to help or hurt them in Orlando? Remains to be seen. I have no idea. Once again, it's another question mark with the Sixers. I have no idea what you're getting. And, Brett Brown is coaching for his job because he'll get replaced after the season if they bow out too early in the playoffs.
Would you do anything more if they lost in the first round? Like, would you run it back again? Like, even if they just fired Brett Brown, would you run back that same roster? Or I don't know. It feels like they've been in the situation like 3 years straight.
Well, it becomes a question of, if you blow it up, most of those pieces are immovable. I don't think anybody's taken Horford off your hands. You've got Tobias locked in, and I don't think Tobias is going anywhere. So it comes down to, do you move Joel or do you move Simmons? And I don't know that they're at a point where they want to make that decision just yet.
Yeah.
So I would assume the core stays, and Brett Brown, they nix him and they bring in someone else. I don't know who that'll be. But yeah, I mean, there's still some good coaches floating out there. As much as Knicks fans weren't the happiest about Thibodeau's hiring, I think the best option potentially off the top of my head is Kenny Atkinson. But he's got no championship pedigree. He's just taken, disparate groups of guys and molded them into a solid unit and team. Can you do that with, because I don't know that Simmons and Embiid really like one another. They're willing to coexist, but is it like a Shaq and Kobe situation?
There's something missing there.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what it is. And adding Horford did not help. It actually, their offense slows down. It doesn't help them. So I don't know. But Brett Brown knows he's coaching for his job, so he'll be 86th if they don't make it far enough in the league. Do you have any potential surprise team where you think they could make it to a conference finals, either side?
If you would consider Miami a surprise, I think they're that strong. But other than that, I guess in the West, I mean, if Portland got in, I don't think I don't know. I just feel like the Lakers are an injury away or like a weird start to series away from being in trouble in this kind of environment against somebody like Portland.
I mean,
It'd be a lot, but if there was a time for something like that to happen, Portland looks good.
yeah, they do. I mean, they're finally at the roster that they had always intended to be. And you've got, with Gary Trent Jr. basically being the best shooter in the bubble, and you couple him with Dame, CJ, Carmelo, and you surround those around Nurkic. It's just like, okay, well, we can bang with Nurkic down low and then surround him with 4 excellent shooters now with Gary. It's like, okay, they were everybody's sexy pick coming into this. Like, Chuck said he's the pick for them, to make it out of the West, which seems crazy. But now that you watch him play, it's like, there's some legitimacy to that. At the Lakers, like, you still have LeBron and AD, but Christ, I don't trust Deion Waiters. I trust JR more than I do Deion, but Deion's getting more run right now.
Yeah, Caldwell Pope. It's like,
yeah,
is that championship level?
Yeah, I've always found Caldwell Pope to be a little bit of fool's gold. And, LeBron is your point guard, but then either you're going to have KCP or Caruso basically D up the other point guard. Well, that's a mismatch for, OKC and Houston and, depending on who they've got to go against the Clippers. But I like Jamal Murray better than both of those guys for Denver. And it's like, that's a big problem for them. Still, though, you still have LeBron and AD is playing lights out. So
they'll find a way, but I feel like it's going to look ugly at times.
Yeah, it very well could. The Clippers, will they finally round themselves into shape? Putting Montrez back with the team and getting him out there and playing will be a big boost for them. But they're the deepest, most complete team, and they should have won that game last night. And Booker practically double teamed with Kawhi and Paul George. Still got a shot off. Still hit it. Granted, the game means more to Phoenix, but I don't know. I'm not entirely sure. The West is a big fat, like, you could sell me on somehow OKC makes it out just because of Chris Paul's generalship, even though in the playoffs, he doesn't have the proven track record, but this year is such a weird year that, all right, I'm willing to take the argument, whereas previous years, just like, I need to see it from Chris Paul.
And there's no drama there. Like, they know exactly who they are up and down the roster. Like, he's got his team this time that they'll live or die by him.
They will. And when they run out those 3-point guard lineups with him, Schroeder, and SGA, it's like they're pretty deadly. And they got a lot of shooting out there. And like you just said, everybody on the team knows exactly who they are. So that's always good. Well-defined roles as opposed to, plugging guys in like one of the Morris brothers this late. It's like, okay, it's nice to have, but they don't know exactly their role. Or seeing Reggie Jackson play so much for the Clippers. Or late last night, with the Bucks late in game, rather, Marvin Williams, a recent addition out there to close the game. Granted, that's not going to happen in a regular game, but are you going to have to rely on these guys you just added? Or is it going to be somebody like OKC where just like, nope, we all have a set position. Like their recent addition is Andre Robertson, who's been with the team. Right. So it'll be interesting to see how they pan out. But, I could believe a lot of different situations as to who makes it out from each conference. Now, the bottom of the East, I'm sorry, Orlando and Brooklyn, you have no chance. Just zero chance. I'd be surprised.
They weren't even there, honestly. Every game they're on is instantly at the bottom of the watch list of the day.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. Unless the matchup is super intriguing, because there's 4 games a day. I don't have the time to watch all 4, but I've made the time to watch at least 2 games. Like I watched 2 games and a quarter and a half of another one yesterday. But if one of those is a Nets or Orlando or a Wizards game, then I automatically don't watch. Just like, this is pointless. It's either an easy W for somebody else or, it's a game that doesn't really matter ultimately to me. They're much more intriguing matchups because we have 4 games a day. It's pretty fantastic.
It's amazing. Been the best part is it's felt like March Madness more than I thought it would. Because like when the scrimmages were going, I was like, I mean, I love this because it's back, but there's just something that felt missing. But I've been pleasantly surprised with like how intense all the games have been.
I was surprised by how intense some of the scrimmages were.
Yeah, okay. They brought it just because they're excited to play basketball again. But like the production value too on TV of the actual games, I've been pleasantly surprised with because like even the virtual fans, which I think is corny and everything, and like it doesn't work in a lot of ways, but it's been cool to see like how they had Jason Tatum's son on there, and like they've been kind of
Yeah.
creative with it.
Paul Pierce, Dirk Nowitzki,
Yeah.
just a static shot, but still,
Yeah.
Dirk's in the stands. It's slowly, I think, rounding into shape better and better and better. Initially, it felt really weird, and it still feels a tad bit off to me. But I think ultimately, it's better than just some static image or posting just the scores and a logo of the team or whatnot. It's slightly more engaging. And there's a great screenshot of that Devin Booker shot from last night, and all the Clipper fans like freaking out behind.
Yeah, they're all like,
Yeah, and just like, you know what, that's kind of it gives at least a semblance of the atmosphere, but there are numerous points where you see an amazing play and there's no crowd to go, oh, like just go off.
yeah.
That aspect of it, sucks because it reduces how amazing some of these plays have been. But if that's the trade-off and we get basketball, so be it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm utterly fine with that. Any closing thoughts?
That's all I got really. I'm just excited to have this back, and I think the playoffs are going to be more fun than people are expecting. I think there's going to be a lot of chaos and anything can happen kind of deal. So yeah, it's going to be fun.
Yeah, it should be. And with all these games, and it's going to be every other night, it is just an absolute cornucopia of basketball, much to my wife's chagrin. It's fantastic. I'm watching basketball all the time, and she just kind of has to suffer through it. It's great. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining and then helping on the previous show. I'll be doing these sporadically throughout. So if you want to come back on, I'll put the call out to Twitter again. And thanks for joining me, Ben.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks for having me.
All right. Have a good one, man.
You too. See ya.
All right. So that was Ben from Indianapolis. He's from Los Angeles. I learned that last time, but he went home during COVID to be with family. So he is a Pacers fan from Indianapolis. And now I'm joined by Benjamin Rose, who is a Bucks fan by way of Phoenix, jumping in right now. I've got a static image of you and the fam. There you are. How are you, Ben?
Hey, what's going on?
You doing a little moving? You got some work clothes on there.
I am recording from an undisclosed location in a metal truck in Arizona, so it's got to be at least 140 degrees in this truck.
Dear God. You tried to torture yourself?
Yeah, well, I could stand to lose a couple of pounds.
You're about to. All right. Thank you. First off, thank you for helping me do the dry run last night. I thoroughly appreciate it. Where do you want to start off the discussion?
Wherever you like.
Well, I mean, I watched your Bucks last night. I watched a little bit of the opening, and then I watched the close. And granted, look, your starters played. Lopez played the most at 20 minutes and change. Giannis and Middleton played exactly the same, 15-47. And everybody else, Hill and Bledsoe played less than 20. I think they're like 18-ish apiece. So it's not really representative of who you are. But what I did take away is your second unit is championship aspirational level against kind of a glorified G League team. Do you take anything away from the fact that they couldn't close out late in that game?
There's the Al Pacino movie, I forget whichever one, whatever the one with McConaughey where they're talking about gambling addiction, and he talks about,
Yeah. All for the money.
Something for the money.
Yeah.
Maybe two for the money. Maybe that's it.
Two for the money, something like that.
Where he talks about how he's basically a lemon and how he actually feels a lot more comfortable losing than winning. As Bucks fans, I think the natural level of kind of panic is now set in again about, a game, like you said, a couple of games. I mean, the Rockets game was a very competitive game that the Bucks just kind of blew at the end. But to lose to the G League All Stars, with the Nets, is concerning. It's concerning. I think a lot of people have put a lot of weight into Dante DiVincenzo. He didn't really have the best game going forward, but there's a real question of, when it comes right down to it, how does our bench stack up against the Raptors or the Celtics or these other good teams?
Yeah.
So obviously, to panic would be a little ridiculous. To actually panic about the third game in this tournament where guys don't really appear to have their legs under them and everything else like that. But we're the Bucks. Why not panic?
Well, I mean, it's, interesting to close out when you have Mason and Marvin Williams out there. Marvin, a recent addition. Now it's, you want them to get game time, to get within the system so Budenholzer can see what he's got there. Who, by the way, looks like a Civil War general with that beard. It's pretty fantastic. But, even against against the Rockets to close out, it's like Giannis ran into the same problem of, as soon as he gets kind of any resistance towards him driving, he defaults to kick out to Middleton, and then Middleton has to kind of force up a last-second shot, and it's weird. They're in the same situation they were last year, for me at least, going, okay, I need somebody on this team to be able to get a bucket, because that's what the playoffs is you have an alpha that no matter what, we can put the ball in his hands, and we've got a better than average chance of getting a shot. And I still don't know if you guys have that. And that seems strange to me, considering how much of a historical juggernaut with point differential and blowing teams out all season, that the question still remains on some level.
His name was Malcolm Brogdon, and perhaps he has degenerative foot condition, or perhaps he's just going to be that guy who's always hurt. I am a little bit of a Brogdon stan, in so much as when the discussion kind of took place with the Middleton contract, I was like, hey, we won 60 games. We're the toast of the league, even though we choked in the playoffs. Time to take some discounts, boys, and see, who can all come back. And apparently management, thought it was a better idea to give Chris $182 million or whatever he ended up getting, and, take Brogdon away. To me, Brogdon very much fits in that kind of Derek Fisher, kind of Robert Horry, kind of, he was just, there's something nice about a basketball player, the type of player that just simply is just switched on or off. Brogdon caught the ball. Either he was going to get his 3-point off or he was going to drive, but there was no screwing around. He was straight line to the hoop. I'm going to the hoop or I'm going to shoot. And we need another guy like that. And so, a lot of the other guys, Wes Matthews, pretty good. Kyle Korver, when he's on, pretty good. These are names that we know, but I mean, the history of the NBA kind of suggests that you don't really know how these names are going to show up in the playoffs. And so I'm concerned about the bench currently. I think there will still be a good amount of games in the playoffs where the Bucks just blow teams out. But I always felt like we needed one more clutch guy. And for me, I'm in the tank for Malcolm Brogdon, but I wanted one more guy. Now we're really trying to replicate that kind of Dirk 2011 thing where, hey, if everything breaks right, we'll do it, as opposed to historic point differential, we'll kill everybody. And so, but one bad game, It
is. Well, that and the Houston game, I think the Houston was the more troubling. The Nets is anomalous. I mean, the starters weren't playing, and take from that what you will. I think that was more about Budenholzer trying to figure out what exactly he feels, who he can rely on his bench come playoff time and who he can't. And, all coaches reduce their rotations down to about 8 players, max 9. So who knows if Marvin Williams or Mason or anyone else is actually going to get run out there. Korver if you need specific shooting, but it's not like you're going to rely on Korver. Whereas, DiVincenzo is going to be out there for big chunks. Ersan Ilyasova probably going to be out there for big chunks. So, yeah, it's just can't get another bucket. Like, who do you fear most in the East to rival your potential chance to make it out?
I had a terrible epiphany yesterday, and tell me if you agree with this or not. Bucks fans have kind of been deciding who to blame about last year, kind of the flame out against Toronto. And for the first time ever, and we blame Budenholzer. You tend not to put too much blame on Giannis. It's his first time in the Eastern Conference Finals, et cetera. And I finally looked at the Raptors, and I was like, you know what? On paper, the Raptors had a better team than us last year. Like, if you really go man for man, if you say Giannis and Kawhi, well, Kawhi on one leg, but you can call that a wash or call that any kind of way you want. And you got Siakam and Middleton. You got Lowry and Brogdon.
You have Ibaka and Van Vliet was on fire. And you go right down the list and you see kind of the continued growth of Toronto. I think the Bucks can beat Toronto, but man for man, I think they've mastered playoff basketball. And it's still the Eastern Conference. And on a certain level, attrition. Now, of course, the other thing we learned from the initial game is how much Bucks fans continue to be terrified of Marcus Smart breaking Giannis's arm or something else, with kind of this flop charge kind of thing. But I think the Bucks are such a gifted team when they're on and hitting shots that there's a very real question of we're really just scared of the guys who might either hurt Giannis or, a team of really tough dudes. I think we got a lot of guys. I mean, Bledsoe's kind of mentally weak, but physically strong. Chris is kind of mentally kind of medium, but not really physically strong. And there's this, again, I'm just probably too old, but there's a very real question of, are the Raptors our 90s Knicks? And so I personally am still scared of the Raptors. The other argument you certainly make is that the second best player in the conference is Embiid. And so you should fear the Sixers the most. But for me,
the Ben Jones, who was on before you, we were talking about them, and I just don't know what you're going to get from the Sixers night in, night out, and that's the problem. So Embiid could, if he was healthy, in shape, right diet, checked in, could be an unstoppable force in the league year in, year out. But I don't know what the hell I'm going to get from Embiid. Right. The Raptors, I love that they went down to Florida Gulf Coast before everybody else and got in a mini camp before they opened up, just proving even more that it's about team and it's about us coming together. And they've run the gauntlet of injuries this year, and it's been as cliched statement as it is, next man up, but they have done next man up over and over and over again. And all these guys have gotten so much so that a ton of them now, Norman Powell and two or three other Raptors that would be in the running for sixth man of the year got too many starts. So they don't qualify for sixth man of the year because they had so many damn injuries that, they got Chris Boucher looks amazing at times. They have numerous guys on their squad that are these reclamation projects from the G League, and Nick Nurse pops them into the system, gives them a defined role. Boom, they know exactly what they need to do. I think the Raptors, that is, the most team of like Bonami, the Ubuntu of the Celtics from the 2000s. Rings very true to me. Like, I could see the Raptors potentially making this on a back-to-back just because they have so much depth. To me, it comes down to, can Siakam actually be the alpha on a team that does this? Because as he goes, I think that their fortunes go in a best-of-7 game series. And the Celtics' depth I like, but there's also some inconsistency issues. And now with Kemba, is that a degenerative knee condition? Is it arthritis? Is it something he's going to have for the rest of his career? Like, who knows? But they really need him for their offensive punch. So you guys could make it out, but Middleton, I would hope, with the stamp of approval from the contract and making the all-star team, and just like, okay, now he's got a good shot of making third team All-NBA.
Yes.
To be cemented as one of the top tier talents within this league. Is that going to be enough for you to give you the confidence in those late game situations? Because Giannis needs somebody to kick out to that's just going to, clutch, shoot that shot, bury it from deep. So that way it opens it up even more. So when he runs into the lane in those late game situations, they can't just collapse 2 to 3 men and create a wall, because now Middleton is going to be wide open.
If this was a thing, this is not a thing. This isn't baseball. But seriously, if we could sit Chris Middleton the entire game and only play him the last 5 minutes of the game, I'd be into it. Because I think he's kind of, and I'm just about the biggest Middleton hater you can imagine. He's played far better this year. And so there is some confidence because he's a great shooter. He's a dead-eye shooter. The thing is, he's not really in great condition. He's a creative passer. You get a lot of turnovers kind of with letting him have the ball too much. And I always feel with him, this season aside, that he's kind of risen to the level of his own incompetence, where is a second-round pick, and he's just completely outshot what anyone would have thought for him as an NBA player. But now we're talking about Jimmy Butler and Paul George and LeBron and AD and truly, truly gifted generationally great players. And that's not Chris Middleton. He's kind of a poor man's Reggie Miller, without the clutch stuff. Yeah. And so we're really asking, like he's almost like on a really great team. If he hadn't, kind of had these years of growing with the Bucks, if he was just kind of a journeyman, to me, he's a classic 6-man. And that kind of be the best kind of utilization of him on a better team is just a guy who comes in and just shoots. But for the Bucks, I mean, to make the comparison, I think I made this last time. If Giannis is Shaq, we need the Kobe. And, no one's Kobe, but we need the other flamethrower guy. When it comes right down to it, we're asking far too much. Giannis is going to have 36 and 15 just about every night, but we're asking far too much for him to have to then close the game. He can contribute to closing the game, but we just need another guy. I mean, these guys are out there in the league. We just need another guy who's like, all right, now it's my time to win this game. And it doesn't have to be a Kobe Bryant level guy, but we just need another very good player. And so that's the concern.
Somebody else that can get you a bucket, but you guys are hamstrung with the cap situation, and you need to win now to secure, Giannis's long-term future with the team. Because if that doesn't come to fruition, then who knows? It's a big fat question mark. Let's flip over to the West. The teams battling it out for that 8th seed. Who do you think has the best shot right now of making it in and being the final team?
Well, are we still thinking Portland? I mean, Portland is the first round matchup I want to see. I don't think that's who the league wants to see. I think the league probably still wants Zion, but I would really like to see, because again, now this is just the Bucks thing inverted. Like, you want to see a team that can get hot. Could they beat the Lakers? It's probably quite unlikely, but could they give them a real scare? Could it be 2-2 in this weird bubble tournament with no home court? Yeah, probably. And so, that's kind of what I'm rooting. I'm rooting for chaos, because I think the Bucks can beat, again, everything's back to the Bucks. I think they can beat the Clippers. The Clippers are, to me, the best overall team in the league when everything's clicking, but a little bit more of an ensemble. I'm terrified of the Lakers. I want the Lakers out immediately. So, you ask me, I want to see Portland and LA first round.
I think, if the league, if they had their druthers and they could manipulate this however they wanted to, Portland and the Pelicans would make it in, and Memphis and Utah would drop out. And that way they still get Dame in the playoffs, because then Dame's already had a bunch of great moments, so they can carry on that legacy. Plus you get Zion and the ratings that Zion would contribute overall. Although at this point, it's just ratings numbers. They've already sold all their ad time for the rest of the season. Yeah. So, they've got that money coming in so long as the games get played. But, Memphis now with Jaren Jackson Jr. with torn meniscus.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, he's done for the season.
Right.
So, and they've got a tough schedule. They've got the Pelicans, and they've got a hell of a schedule coming up. So the Blazers have a gauntlet schedule. The Pelicans have the easiest. They've got the Kings twice. They've got the Magic, they've got the Nets, and they've got the Spurs. So 4 of those 5 are easily winnable. Whereas, the Blazers have got Nuggets and OKC and Sixers and I think Heat. I can pull it up, and like everybody else has at least 3, if not 4, other teams that are fighting for seeding and to solidify their playoff position. But the Blazers look really strong right now. Gary Trent Jr. is the best shooter in the bubble. So now you've got shooting for days. You've got the height. Zach Collins being back. They're going to be really difficult. Unfortunately, I think the Grizzlies are going to slip out of this playoff race. Although, if they can just win a couple games, especially the 2 against the Pels, or not the 2, not the 2, never mind. But if they just win a couple games, they can hold on to their position.
There's a real question there continues to be whether, maybe week 2 will be a little bit different than week 1, but there's a real question of, look, we know home court doesn't really matter anymore, but there's still a question of, will the officiating kind of normalize? The officials are ramping back up to, the game shape and just kind of the way they call it. I feel like there's been a lot of calls kind of called in the early going, but it's like, normally you'd say, okay, well, OKC at the Lakers, that should be a win. Or we would expect the Suns, for example, to just lay down. But all these teams, like, there's just a great question of any game to game as to what exactly is going to take place. Guys have been pent up. The guys are still wanting to, make a name for themselves, even if they're not going to make the playoffs. And so I don't know if you feel the same. I've been really generally impressed with the professionalism shown by everybody. It seems like they were ready to get on the court. Even the scrimmages didn't really look like scrimmages, and the games, like Lakers Lakers Clippers was a game, like night one.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's been really compelling.
Yeah, there's been numerous where just like, this is heated. These guys are legitimately going at each other. And sometimes when the stakes are unclear, just like, oh, you've already got positionally, like that first game with Lakers Clippers, why was LeBron playing 38 minutes? Didn't make sense.
I don't know.
But I mean, now that they've secured the number one overall, I would assume his minutes for sure, hopefully, if I'm a Lakers fan, they would trail off, but who knows? He might be a guy that feels he needs to play, 30 to 35 a game to keep his legs going. But you're going to have 3.5 straight months of games, so get the rest while you can.
Well, and I think that's how we're used to thinking of it. But I mean, I'm certainly not a doctor, but I think we're used to thinking of, hey, any 5 minutes you can get a guy off. That's what you do with the 82 game season. And if you're fortunate enough to have a first round cakewalk, let's keep resting the guys. At a certain point, I just wonder if this is just a sprint for everybody without kind of knee problems or kind of nagging injuries. It may be that they just, because I know Budenholzer has come out and said that the Bucks are going to try something a little bit different. But it seems to me that half the other teams are just, they're saying, hey, we're probably not going to make the conference finals anyway, and we're just going all out from game one. And I think that really has added to the quality of the TV watching, at least.
It should favor the younger teams just because they'd be able to run way more. We'll see if that bears out as the playoffs begin and progress. If the younger squads, just because they can tax themselves just a little bit harder. It'll be. I can't wait. I mean, we're a little over a week away in playoffs already. It's pretty fantastic, and all the games.
It's great.
Any closing thoughts before I say goodbye?
No, I at this point I just want no injuries, right? At this point, I mean, obviously there's we've had the Isaac situation, we've had the Triple J situation.
Yep.
And I think, I mean, of course, obviously the COVID stuff goes without saying, but I think this has a chance, and we're NBA junkies, right? So of course, what are we going to say? But I think this has a chance not just to be, it's certainly not an Astor season. This has a chance to be a very special, one of the really talked about playoff runs, where this may be, depending on how it shakes out, the really last great LeBron James run, because he's got a chance to steal a title too, just like everybody else. There's a lot of historically great players who have a hand in the poker game right now, and I just want no injuries. And Paul George, I want Kawhi, just want everybody to stay healthy, and both the kind of weird nature, the weird kind of summer league feel of the bubble and everything else. This has a chance to be just one of the truly historic, great finals, and so we're looking forward to the playoffs.
Yeah, it's a distinctly unique situation that could, we're all going to remember this season. It's going to loom larger in our memories than numerous others just because of the anomalous nature of it. But it's good to see that everybody is tuned in, is playing hard. They're taking it seriously. The league, you can tell the time, effort, and thought that went into building all of this out.
Yes.
I have very little criticism that I've seen that rings true. So, yeah, I agree. There are a tremendous number of legacies that could be dramatically altered. If the Clippers win, then Kawhi has now won 3 championships and 3 more than likely finals MVPs. But LeBron has that same thing on the line to win a 3rd championship for a different team, and both have it in different conferences. Can Chris Paul finally make the huge push into the playoffs, or the Rockets? Can the Rockets get over the hump? And in the East, can Giannis make that leap to finals and potentially win a championship, or the Raptors solidify themselves as one of the best teams of the past few years?
And then you start thinking about the Raptors like the Spurs. All of a sudden with Nurse, you start thinking of them as the Spurs North. So that's also on the table.
They build the team around the talent they have, as opposed to just trying to create a system and then finding the players that do the system. It's like, okay, we're going to just as Popovich has done, they changed up their styles over the years. And Nurse, when you watch it, they'll run zone for a couple minutes and then switch to man and then switch to a different zone. Or it's really impressive to watch him on the fly make the changes that he feels the team needs to make, but then plug and play with, okay, I think tonight we're going to get more out of this guy, so he's going to get a little bit more. And Yeah, there's quite a bit on the line, and a lot is up in the air. I think it's anybody's year, and it's nice to see from the NBA because usually it's a fait accompli of, oh, the Warriors. The Warriors are, it's theirs to lose. And this year, it's just like, I don't think there's a single team that you can say is genuinely the overall number one favorite. There are teams within the mix of that top tier, but it's been a while where there hasn't been, out of at least one conference, you assume X is going to make it out. Like, you could sell me on all kinds of different realities in both conferences, and that's what's going to make this playoff so exciting is how it all unfolds.
And that's the closest thing to what I think NFL fans have taken for granted. And there's very much a narrative that we always hear about in the NFL that any team can win, and if you're 3-13 one year, you might be 13-3 the next. And the NBA, Kyle Hurd or all these kind of guys for years have said, no, it's the League of Stars. All the best ratings periods are when it was the Bulls or the Lakers and the Celtics. And a lot of that's true. But I think what we're, like you said, with the Warriors not having 4 of the top 20 players or whatever it is, you've got Westbrook and Harden. You've got, LeBron and Davis. You've got Paul George and Kawhi. You've got Giannis and Giannis. And you've got so really, this is our best look at what true parity in an NBA kind of sense is, where you have a lot of storylines. It's not that you just want to see one game a day. There's many games that you'd like to see. And I think as close to parity comes in the league, it's these teams with two historically great superstars and an ensemble. And I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, can't wait to see it unfold. All right. Anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
Teutonia World is the YouTube channel, probably the easiest way for listeners other than trying to spell Teutonia World, which is mostly Wisconsin stuff. Just look up Packers Supercut. I'm the first 2 on YouTube. If you look up Packers Supercut or Bucks Supercut, the Bucks Misery Supercut, or if you look up Bucks Supercut, I'll be there. Also, Teutonia World Presents is the podcast, and I'm David Dunn 21 on Twitter.
All right. Well, Ben, thank you so much for joining me a second time, but this one will actually go out to the world. The last one was kind of a test run, and I'll be doing these sporadic. I'm doing 2 shows a week, so this will happen again. I'll put the call out to Twitter. So if you respond just like you did on this one, boom, well, I'll have you back on because it's a good conversation, just like it was with Ben Jones. And I just want to say thanks.
Hey, quite a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
All right, man. Have a good one. Stay safe.
All right, you too.
All right, there we go. That is today's show right there. My thanks to Ben and Ben. It's pretty easy for me to remember for having come on. So by Friday, I should have the live stream up on YouTube, and I'll tweet out the link, and you should be able to comment on it. I've got Sam Tripoli as a guest on Friday, and I have I'll announce I should have the guest for one of the 2 shows next week lined up by Friday, so I can announce that guest on Friday. But yeah, I got Tripoli coming on. One of my favorite people to talk basketball to, or with rather, a guy that I've gone to summer league with and Clippers games here in LA. One of my favorite people to talk to, about basketball. The guy's got opinions and he's entertaining as shit to talk to. I hope you enjoy listening to him as much as I enjoy talking to him. But, he's a close friend and a diehard basketball fan, and I love having him on. So he'll be on Friday. It'll be at noon Pacific Standard Time, 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Friday. That's going to be the go time for all of these. At least that's my intention, is Wednesdays and Fridays at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And thanks to all of you out there that listened. Hopefully you're enjoying the NBA bubble as much as I am, legitimately watching a couple games a day. It's pretty fantastic. All the different matchups to see the progressions of teams and, how one win or loss dramatically affects potential seedings and matchups and bubble implications for those teams in the West. It's been so much fun. And it's nice to be back talking basketball with all of you. Let me know what you think on Twitter at Matt Nost. I thoroughly appreciate it. And going forward, we'll have the graphics, and we've already, we got intro music, although I might get flagged for that for copyright, but we'll see. We'll wait till it happens before I genuinely worry about it as of right now. But it's a work in progress. It's just so much on everybody's plate, given the weird situation of the world right now, that trying to get all this up and off the ground and going I was just so excited to start talking basketball again that I'd rather get it out to get the discussion going with everybody as opposed to waiting to get it just, perfect, pitch perfect from moment one. Because once again, twice a week for the next 3.5 months, we'll have this dialed in nicely by the end. And that is it for me on Dropping Dimes this week. If you want to subscribe to the podcast channel or the YouTube channel, I thoroughly appreciate it. But if you just enjoyed listening, that's great too. If you want to give a rating on iTunes or your podcast app of choice, that'd be awesome, but your choice entirely. I'm not going to do a call to arms of hit that subscribe button and blah, 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 blah every week. You will or you won't. That is your decision. I just appreciate the fact that you want to have an NBA conversation with me. And that's it for me this week. Stay safe out there. Wash those hands. Keep 6 feet apart, especially if you're in the U.S. And that is it for Dropping Dimes. I'll see you guys next time.